this countdown we have the Devil's Bible. The Devil's Bible, otherwise known as the Codex Gigas, is a massive book said to harbor an immense amount of negative energy. I mean, duh, it's called the Devil's Bible for a reason. So basically, legend goes that this 157-pound book was written by a monk. But this monk broke his spiritual vows, and so he was sentenced to be sealed behind a brick wall and left to die. But the night before his death, he realized he wouldn't be able to finish this book. So he summoned Lucifer and asked him to complete the book for him. In return, he offered him his soul. So legend goes that the book was finished by the devil himself. What's creepier is that some of the pages are filled with drawings of the devil and other demonic entities. On one page, there's a 19-inch drawing of Satan. The book also contains a bunch of dark rituals and texts. If the book got in the wrong hands, who knows what damage they could do.
Coming in at number 9, we have the Voynich Manuscript, a book that has baffled all of the best minds in the world. It was discovered by antiquarian book dealer Wilfred M. Voynich near Rome in an old chest in 1912. It immediately caught his attention due to its lackluster appearance, which was unlike all the other pretty ones in the compartment. But what he found inside became a mystery that keeps getting stranger. Apparently the codex was purchased by Roman Emperor Rudolph II, who believed it was written by Roger Bacon. But Bacon lived in the 12th century and the paper carbon dated to the 15th century, so already Inside the book has remained incomprehensible to even the most impressive cryptographers and linguists. They've identified at least 25 to 30 characters, and though the writing and illustrations don't make sense, it doesn't appear to be gibberish. Alan Turing all the way to artificial intelligence have all taken turns, but to no avail. From images of planets long extinct and intricate astrological signs, no one knows what the hell it means, but many speculate that it could have been written, get ready for this, by aliens. Of course, when we don't know the answer, aliens! It's the only logical solution. But if it does belong to aliens, what if they want it back?
And at number 8 we have Untitled Grimoires. Grimoires are witches' spell books, but it's said that they need to be burned after the witch's death. However, this one was not burned. Instead, it was kept, and in 2013 it sold on a website. It was sold for $13,865. That's a lot of money for a book. But here's the thing, the book came with a warning. It said, and I quote, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further, or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hand of the craft." So basically, the book is cursed if it falls into the wrong hands. This book is also said to contain a number of curses, enchantments, and spells. Also, it tells you how to perform an exorcism, you know, just in case you summon a demon and then everything goes wrong. I mean, any book that tells you how to summon ghosts and demons should just be burned. I'm sorry.
Coming in at number 7, we have Tominas Hell, and here is yet another book that you should never read, because if you do, your lives and the lives of those you love could be in jeopardy. Tominas Hell was written by Yamamoto Uniko in a book that's titled The Heart is Like a Rolling Stone. Legends of how this curse started vary, but results such as vomiting glass and loved ones dying tragic deaths continue to be associated with the poem. One radio show host tried to read it aloud on air, and halfway through started to feel ill and disturbed and wasn't able to finish it. He continued to feel ill, and a few days later he got into an accident that resulted in him having to get 7 stitches. To this day, he tries not to even think about the poem and warns other people against it. But I thought I'd surprise everyone today and read the poem out loud, so we'll see. But let's see if this myth is true, shall we? Here's the poem. Just kidding! I'm not gonna read it out loud, and nor should you.
In our 6th spot we have the Book of Soy. Sounds weird, I don't know if I pronounced it wrong, but we're gonna roll with that. This book has quite the history behind it. So it was created in the 16th century and is a Latin essay all about demonology. Apparently, there are only 2 copies in existence. One was owned by a man named John Dee and his brother. They both were determined to translate the entire book. Upon translating it, they figured it was a book filled with dark rituals and incantations. But the last 36 pages were untranslatable. He became so obsessed with trying to figure out what the last pages read that it drove him to madness. After his death, the books were lost for the longest time until 1994. That's when 2 copies were found. Now legend goes that those that successfully decipher the final pages of the book will die within 3 years. So it's up to you. Will you tempt fate and decipher the pages? Or should we burn the book so that no one else dies? I'll go with the latter.
The Orphan Story, coming in at number 5. This book started out innocent until it started racking up victims. The Orphan Story is an adventure book about a Spanish teen who ventures to Lima to party like there's no tomorrow, and then there's other adventures and romantic stories and yada yada yada. It was written by an Augustinian friar named Martin de Leon between 1605 to 1615, who'd also been to Lima, but he never wanted to get it published for fear that it would taint his chances in becoming archbishop, but that didn't stop people from trying, and maybe it should've. When it was rediscovered in the Hispanic history archives, many were discouraged from working on it as it was believed to be cursed. Dun dun dun! Those who had tried to publish it before had all died, one from a random car accident and the other from an entirely mysterious disease. No one touched it for years until one brave man took on the task once more. It was actually published for the first time in 2018, and the publisher believes that the curse has finally been lifted. Not that there wasn't a curse in the first place, but like maybe things will get worse now, who knows? Maybe the curse is waiting for, I don't know, 3 years.
In our 4th spot, we have the Book of Sacred Magic. This 15th century book was written by a man named Abra Malin, who was a mage, aka that's just a fancy word for a magician. Well, he wrote this book for his son, and apparently it's cursed, because why not give your son a cursed book? I mean, it probably wasn't cursed when he got it, but that's besides the point. Anyways, in the 1900s, the book was translated into English, and soon after, people deemed it a curse. Throughout the book, it talked about rituals on how to control your demons. Abra believed that every person had their own demon, not like a metaphorical one, but like a literal one. It also talked about how to perform other supernatural acts. In the end, it was believed that whoever owns a copy will be haunted by the spirits, and bad luck will befall on them. Again, possessions and haunting and bad luck, it's a no from me.
Coming in at number 3 with the Necromonicon. Again, I'm gonna bring this up, but you know that scene from The Mummy when Evie is like, what harm has ever come from reading a book? And then proceeded to unleash hell by reading the Book of the Dead? Well, lesson learned, right? No, because the Necromonicon, also called the Book of the Dead, is an ancient grimoire, and as we know, we should burn grimoires, but we don't. And it's bound in human skin and has inspired many horror films like Evil Dead. This book is so powerful, some even say one word from its pages and horrors beyond your wildest nightmares will emerge. This book was featured as a fictional object in H.P. Lovecraft's stories, and he even allowed authors to cite it as a source so it could become more real. Lovecraft insisted it was made up, but many tried and true fans of the occult think otherwise. They think that the book in fact exists, but it's hidden so it will never cause any harm. H.P. says the idea for the book came to him in a dream, but many say that the spirit of the book chose Lovecraft to reveal it, meaning there are people hunting for the real thing. My advice? Don't. Leave it alone. Again, we don't need it. Demons can stay where they are, okay?
In our 2nd spot, we have the Great Omar. This is another book that has quite the dark past. So basically, in 1909, a man named Sangorsky decided to create a much fancier version of the book, The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. I'm gonna apologize right now, I know I totally butchered that name. Now, he bejeweled it and made the cover look absolutely beautiful. It took him 2,500 hours to create. In the end, it had 1,500 precious/semi-precious stones, 4,967 leather inlays, and 600 sheets of 22-karat gold leaf. It's honestly a very beautiful book. But the thing is, no one wanted to buy this super expensive book when they could literally just get one for much cheaper. But eventually it was put up for auction, but it only sold for £450. Now, the book was shipped, but it never got to the buyer. Why? Well, the ship it was being transported on was the Titanic, and the book went down with the ship. Then only a few weeks later, the creator of this book mysteriously drowned. Ain't that a freaky coincidence? But that's not all. A second version was created called the Great Omar II. It was then placed in a bank vault. But the bank was hit by a bomb during the London Blitz of World War II, and this copy was destroyed as well. Then a third copy was created because they didn't learn their lesson, and it was donated to the British Library, where apparently it's still to this day. But due to its dark past, many believe that this book is cursed, and that bad things will happen to whoever owns it.
Coming in at number 1, you know what sucks is that there's a PDF version of this book that Lindsay and I found, and we were both like, no! Like, we opened it by accident, we're like, no, I don't want to read this, I don't want to read this, I don't want to read this. It's really creepy. So this one is The Lesser King of Solomon. The Lesser King of Solomon, or the Goetia, is one of the most famous grimoires and contains a summoning spell for over 72 demons, and no one knows who wrote it. Written entirely in Latin, the book dates back to the 14th and 15th century, though any remaining manuscripts date to the 16th and 18th. Legend has it that King Solomon originally had it written for his son and asked him to bury it with him in his grave when he died. But supposedly, a group of Babylonian philosophers discovered it while repairing his tomb, and one of them was said to have had a vision sent to him by an angel that told him to hide the book from the unworthy. He did so by casting a spell on it, which clearly didn't work. The first few chapters contained instructions on how to summon and trap demons in this world, which, by the way, why? I doubt they're as sexy as Lil Nas, okay? But if you're looking for love, the book also contains instructions on how to find it and also how to become invisible. Obviously now, copies of this book can be found on the internet, but please, for the love of all this stuff, like, just don't. Just burn it, you know? Have someone burn it from the internet. It's just too much out there. We don't want to know what's on the other side just yet. Anyway. Starting off at number 10, we have The Stand by Stephen King. This book is probably one of those books you should put off reading until after the pandemic is over, whenever that is. We all know Stephen King is quite literally the king of horror, but this novel will hit home way too hard and fill you with ideas of what could have been. The Stand is about an apocalyptic world that fell to a deadly flu-like virus intended to be used as a biological weapon. Already this sounds a bit familiar, but it gets worse. In this book, King introduces one of his most famous villains, Randall Hall. Once the outbreak takes hold, people start having visions of a benevolent woman and a terrifying dark man who is, of course, plotting to destroy the world. I'll stop now before I add any spoilers. Bear in mind, this book is a commitment. There are two versions, the 400-page one Stephen's publisher forced him to publish, or the 1200-page unabridged version. Either way, get comfy and leave the light on, because once you start, you won't be able to put this book down. Also, they made a TV show about it, so check that out too. But after you read the book.
In our number 9 spot today, we have The Collector. The Collector is a book that was written in 1963 by John Fowles and is a pretty wild thriller. This book is written from two separate perspectives and is about an absolute psycho who kidnaps a young woman who is an art student. He keeps her locked up in the cellar of his farmhouse, and part of the novel is from the point of view of the captor, and the other half is told from the perspective of the woman he has kidnapped. The beginning of the novel is from his point of view, and it details his obsession with the woman and why he has formed this horrible plan. The part from her point of view is detailed through diary entries that she's made rather than regular narration. The whole book is an absolute roller coaster and is extremely interesting. Of course, both characters have quite a few developments over the course of the story, and sometimes things can get extremely dark, but the ending is one that none of us really ever saw coming.
Coming in at number 8, we have The Cask of Montelado by Edgar Allan Poe. Dude, I'm not claustrophobic, and obviously there are tons of Edgar Allan Poe short stories, books we could have used, but damn. We couldn't make this list without featuring him at least once, and this story felt right. Warning, some spoilers ahead, but also, this was written in like 1846, you've had time. The Cask of Montelado is a story of revenge. Montresor was deeply insulted by his rival, Fortunato, and uses his fondness for sherry to exact his revenge. But the way he does it, and the way the story builds around it, is so skillful. It's so horrible you want to look away, but you can't. Montresor planned everything to a T, even making Fortunato bait himself into his own trap. Fortunato ends up watching Montresor build a wall of thick stone, trapping him inside a deep cellar forever. I think that's what gets me about this story, is that he's watching his own demise and he can't do anything about it. It terrifies me. Oh man, so maybe I am claustrophobic. Maybe. So anyway, check that one out.
In our number 7 spot today, we have Tender is the Flesh. Tender is the Flesh is a dystopian novel that was originally written in Spanish by Agustina Bazterrica. This novel is based in a world where a terrible virus has wiped out all animals except for humans. Instead of living a vegan lifestyle, humans have adapted in a way where cannibalism is now legal. This novel describes the process of breeding and slaughtering humans just for the means of consumption. Humans who are bred for food have their vocal cords removed in order to make them easier to control, and because of the fact that meat meant for human consumption should certainly not be able to speak. The main character of this story is a man named Marcos, and he is a human meat supplier who is a little unsure about these new societal rules, but we also delve into his personal life and the things he has gone through previous to this point. Marcos is divorced, and everything changes when he is given one of the female humans who is meant to help with the production of the human meat. This story is absolutely insane, and while the entire premise is quite dark, the twist this book has is truly unbelievable.
So coming in at number 6, we have 1984 by George Orwell. I mean, duh, we're putting this book on here, of course. It's terrifying. This is the most terrifying love story you will ever read, and you should. This book perfectly illustrates the bone-chilling possibilities that could happen if a government decided to take totalitarianism as far as it could go. It's been banned in the past for its social, sexual, political content, which is hilariously ironic because the whole book is about what happens if censorship goes too far. From the horrors of erasing human beings through unpersoning, persecuting people for thought crimes, the creation of newspeak for abolishing love, all the way to the most gruesome kinds of torture, like, think Game of Thrones. There are images I cannot erase from my mind. I remember knowing that Orwell wrote this as a commentary on Stalinism, but I didn't expect the love story. The two main characters endeavor to commit a small rebellion, which is to simply fall in love, because that's the only thing that they can do to fight this massive establishment. The way Orwell finds ways of igniting the humanity in his readers in order to highlight the terror of the circumstances they're in, it's haunting. The scary element of this book isn't a killer clown or a monster with 18 eyes. Instead, it's absolute power. This book outlines the terror of power in a world that's gone too far, and you won't be the same after you read it.
In our number 5 spot today, we have A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing. A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing is a stream of consciousness novel that was written by Emer McBride. This novel tells the story of a girl growing up in a traditional Irish family and all the struggles that she faces. At a first glance, this might not seem like a horrible thing that should be feared, but this novel goes deep. The writing style is absolutely fantastic and really highlights exactly what this character is going through. We never get a chance to know the name of the girl, but we get to know so much about her long-winded Catholic mother who is cruel, her disabled brother, and her very creepy uncle. Without giving much away, this really does set the scene for what's to come. This book can be hard to read because of the content, but it can also be hard to read because of the writing style. But as you go through, you understand why it is written this way, and it is genius. This book is intense, and while it took Emer 9 years too long to publish it, that really is a testament to how perfect it is.
Coming in at number 4, we have The Invasion of the Body Snatchers by Jack Finney. I can't. This book, I don't want to sleep for weeks. Imagine an alien invasion happens and you can't even see it. Before you know it, everyone you know and love is acting strangely. Soon bodies start piling up, all while more and more people become something you can't explain. Written in 1955, Invasion of the Body Snatchers by Jack Finney is so terrifying, it has sparked 4 movies and paranoid horror literature. The story recounts the horrific experience of a silent invasion where alien beings disguised as plants steal the bodies of living humans while they sleep. The most terrifying part for me was the struggle for the characters to try and stay awake, because if they didn't, the creatures would be right behind them in like what seemed like seconds. Even thinking about it right now makes my heart race. Have you ever tried not falling asleep in math class or an exam? Yeah, imagine that, but your life depends on it. Terrifying. This is the kind of horror book that will make you want to drink like 28 Red Bulls so you never sleep again.
In our number 3 spot today, we have Exquisite Corpse. Exquisite Corpse is a horror novel that was written by Poppy Z. Bright and was published in 1996. The publication for this book was quite a process for Poppy. In 1991, she had a deal with a publishing company to write 3 books. Exquisite Corpse was the final of the 3, and this company refused to publish it due to its violent content. After sending it to multiple other publishing companies, the overwhelming consensus was that the writing was fantastic, but the content was being described as too nihilistic, too extreme, and a bloodbath without justification. Of course, however, the novel did eventually end up being published, and a lot of people now understand the reviews the publishing companies were giving it. While a fantastically written book, this story follows Andrew Compton, who is a convicted serial killer and cannibal who ends up getting a second chance at living life beyond the cell. This story is very raw and absolutely horrifying. The parts of the story I haven't told you are certainly not for the faint of heart.
Coming in at number 2, we have The Troop by Nick Cutter. This next one is Lucy McPhee, Queen of Dark approved. She loves a good scary book, does our Lucy. The Troop is basically Lord of the Flies meets Alien, kind of. I asked her why she thought this book was so scary, and she said, it's scary because the kids have to become adults real damn fast, and no one is there to help them. Also touches on how differently people react in unprecedented circumstances. Some lose their grip on reality. I love that word, unprecedented. I've heard it way too many times this year. Essentially, Dr. Tim Riggs takes a group of boys out on a camping trip in Canada when out of nowhere, the troop has to battle a vicious infestation of contagious intestinal worms who starve their hosts. Some go mad and lose their grip on reality. I'll stop there so I don't, spoil everything, but considering this one is Queen of Dark approved, you know why it's on this list.
In our number 1 spot today, we have The Wasp Factory. The Wasp Factory is a novel that was published in 1984 and was written by Ian Banks. This is the first novel that was published from this writer, as the novels he had previously written had not been accepted, and this one was his attempt at writing a more mainstream novel. Well, it worked since it got published, but this novel is anything but mainstream. It follows a psychopathic teenager who is living on a secluded Scottish island. The teenager describes his childhood and the things that went on with some very gruesome details. We read not only about his past, but also the past of his family and how twisted it really is, which also gives us insight into just how wild this guy's mind really is. There are some pretty horrific depictions of violence in this book, which is what led to its mixed reviews. It certainly is a critically acclaimed novel, but it has also been called a work of unparalleled depravity, and that certainly speaks volumes about what exactly goes on.
Starting us off at number 10 is The Exorcist. I would be doing an injustice if I didn't start with one of the scariest movies of all time. And why was it the scariest movie of all time? Because it was one of the scariest books of all time. Written by William Peter Blatty and published in 1971, the book takes place in Washington, D.C. and follows demonically possessed 12-year-old Reagan McNeil, who is also the daughter of a very famous actress. The duo are in Georgetown whilst the mother is filming when Reagan becomes sick. Weird things start happening around the house, which her mother tries to find rational explanations for, and Reagan's condition intensifies and deteriorates. Nothing helps her until the mother gives in and turns to a priest for help. A pair of priests spend the whole book trying to exorcise the demon, and it was actually based off of a real case of possession William heard about in the 50s. I don't want to go into more detail and include spoilers, because if you haven't read it, you definitely should. I feel like scary books scare you in a way that movies just can't. When I used to read them at home alone, I physically could not continue reading because I was scared. I was scared of reading. Like, that is a real fear, people. Coming in at number 9 is Blindness. Written by Jose Saramago and published in 1995, the book follows an unnamed city or country that's been afflicted with an unexplainable epidemic of blindness. And since most people there go blind, a social and economic breakdown soon follows. The plot involves a group of unnamed characters, and the book is written in really long sentences, and there are no speech marks around the dialogue, so you're also like, wait, who's speaking right now? The first half of the book takes place in a dirty, overcrowded asylum where the group and countless other blind people have been quarantined, and the whole thing descends into anarchy basically. People are worried about the availability of food, necessities, no medicines are allowed inside, so even a small infection could end up deadly. Gangs start forming, they start women in exchange for giving them food. It just gets really bad. The only person in the land that doesn't get infected was the doctor's wife, and we follow how she has to try and help the group survive. At number 8 we have The Haunting of Hill House. It's not a horror if a haunted house isn't on this list, am I right? Written by Shirley Jackson and published in 1959, the book has been dubbed one of the best literary ghost stories in the 20th century. It went on to become 2 films, a play, and the basis of a Netflix series, so it's safe to say even the 21st century, we are getting a lot of inspiration from it. Shirley even drew the floor plans of the house and its outside before beginning the novel. The plot takes place in a mansion called Hill House and follows 4 main characters: an investigator of the supernatural, Eleanor, a shy girl, and a disabled mother, Theodora, and the mansion's heir, Luke. They all come to the house because of having experienced something paranormal or wanting to investigate the paranormal. The house itself has been the site of many deaths and suicides, and as their stay progresses, creepy things start happening, as they always do. The house itself seems sentient and angry, but the best part of the book is the narrator. We trust Eleanor from the start because she seems quite reliable and sweet, but as the book progresses, she becomes more and more unreliable. She starts descending into madness, and then it gets confusing on whether the things happening in the house are really happening, or she's just seeing things or hallucinating them. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Filling our number 7 slot is The Silence of the Lambs. I don't know how I could have made this list and not included Hannibal Lecter. Written by Thomas Harris and published in 1988, the book is actually a sequel about the forensic psychiatrist and cannibalistic serial killer Dr. Hannibal Lecter. First of all, has anyone seen the show Hannibal? I watched the first season. I could literally only watch 1 episode a day, not even binge it, because it was just too taxing watching such screwed up things happen for so long. Like, I used to have to mentally prepare before watching it. But anyway, at this point, Hannibal is already in jail, so the plot follows an FBI trainee called Clarice, who is given the task of drawing up psychological profiles of serial killers, starting with Hannibal. Well, that's what she's told, but her real mission that she doesn't know about is to try and get Hannibal's help identifying a new serial killer on the loose, dubbed Buffalo Bill. The plot follows her periodically visiting Hannibal and probing him about the killer. He gives her cryptic clues in exchange for knowing about her disturbing childhood as an orphan. This book won 2 awards for Best Novel, and it's a literary gem. I haven't met anyone who hasn't heard of The Silence of the Lambs. Like, they won't even know what it is, but they would have heard of it for sure. Now at number 6 is Carrie and Comfort. Written by Dan Simmons and published in 1989, it won the Locust Poll Award for Best Horror Novel, the Bram Stoker Award, and the August Derleth Award for Best Novel. Stephen King even calls it one of the greatest horror novels of the 20th century, so based on that, I reckon it's a pretty good book. The book focuses on a fraction of humanity who has intense psychic powers called the Ability. These people can control someone from a distance, and I mean control them, like physically too, as in they could make someone commit murder if they really wanted to. Killing someone indirectly gives the Ability users energy and youth, so they're almost like pseudo-vampires. The book sets up the fact the abilities have been used throughout time, whether that's fake charisma of a world leader, everyday murders, or the Although it's split into many timelines, it mostly follows a group of immoral people in the 80s, some of which want to take over the world. Investigators pursue a series of murders and realize these people really need to be stopped. It's honestly brutal. They get together in one scene and talk about all the people they killed, including John Lennon, and then later on 2 of them end up fighting but use normal humans around them as soldiers to fight each other. It's screwed up, but isn't every book on this list? Coming in at number 5 is A Head Full of Ghosts, written by Paul G. Tremblay and published in 2015. The book follows an American family that's troubled. The dad is unemployed, they barely have any money, and then things get even worse due to the mental illness of their 14-year-old daughter, Marjorie. The book is told from the perspective of Marjorie's 8-year-old sister, Mary, and it starts when Marjorie starts telling Mary macabre stories instead of innocent Dr. Seuss ones. Welcome to the real world, Mary. Anyway, the dad, who is a born-again Catholic, decides Marjorie doesn't have a mental illness, she's demonically possessed, 2 very different things, and so he gets the help of his priest to try and exorcise her. And let's just say Marjorie is not really telling the truth. I'll leave it at that. At number 4 is Let the Right One In. Written by John Lindqvist and published in English in 2008, the book is essentially a vampire story, but it's not like Twilight, before you guys just skip number 4. And for the record, I just like to say I read all the Twilight books, and the books were actually really good. But anyway, the plot follows a 12-year-old boy called Oscar, a vampire child called Eli, and its caretaker Hakan. The story takes place in Stockholm in the 80s and focuses on a plethora of disturbing things. Oscar becomes friends with Eli when it moves in next door, and he finds out Eli was turned into a vampire when they were a child and hence forever remains in a young body and mind. Hakan, Eli's caretaker, was a former teacher and goes out and kills people and gets blood for them in order to sustain them in exchange for money. The story goes on when Hakan gets caught on his last blood procuring mission, and things just get worse and worse from there. Death, murder, acid throwing, blood drinking, the book has it all, and it was adapted into 2 feature films. Filling our number 3 slot is The House of Leaves, and this one is hard because half the people who've read it say it's a horror story and the other half say it's a love story, and I mean there is horror in love and vice versa, so can it be both? But anyway, written by Mark Danielewski and published in 2000, the book itself is incredibly confusing. It has footnotes, and those footnotes have their own footnotes. Some pages just have a few words or a line of text. Some pages you have to rotate the book so you can actually read it. Some pages words are arranged in a way that mirror the story, but basically the format of the book is meant to make you feel claustrophobic. The plot has many narratives, but mostly follows a tattoo parlor employee called Johnny. Johnny's looking for a new apartment when his friend recommends a place in his building from a man who just died. When moving in, he finds an academic manuscript written by that man about a film called The Navidson Record. Except Johnny can't find any evidence of the film ever existing. The main plot focuses on the Navidson family story. The family come home from a trip one day and find that their house is expanded internally, but externally it looks exactly the same. There are more rooms, hallways upon hallways, and all of them are featureless and unlit, and there always just seems to be a low growl sound in the house. Characters start exploring the house and venture into the endless passageways, which ultimately leads to murder, insanity, and death. Now the second plot takes place in the footnotes, and it's about what's happening in Johnny's life, and it gets more and more unclear whether his obsession with the manuscript and consequent paranoia and delusions are because of madness, drug use, or the manuscript itself. The third and final mini-plot are letters woven in from Johnny's mother, who's in a psychiatric hospital. Honestly, with this book you really end up doubting your own perception of the story and what's fact and what isn't, and honestly, what more can you want from a book? Especially a horror book. Now at number 2 is It, written by Stephen King, which I'm sure you all already knew, and published in 1986. It is iconic. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the book since the movies are all out as well, and regardless of whether you've seen them or not, I feel like everyone knows what it's about. The story follows a group of kids that call themselves the Losers Club. The kids realize they all encountered the same shape-shifting entity which took the form of their biggest fears. They named the thing It because they had no idea what it was. It wasn't human, it was genderless, it was it. They figure out It is behind all the murders happening in the town, and they try to stop the evil clown. There's even a bit where Pennywise itself is narrating and telling the reader where it came from. The book is split into 2 timelines taking place 30 years apart, so we see the club as kids in the first one, and then we see them return to Derry in the second one because there's been another slew of murders. I can't even count the amount of times people have recommended it to me and told me it genuinely scared the living hell out of them, and I still refuse to read it. I'm just not gonna do it. That's not me. And finally, at number 1 is Rosemary's Baby, written by Era 11 and published in 1967. The book sold over 4 million copies, and that made it the best-selling horror novel of the 60s. The plot follows Rosemary Woodhouse and her struggling actor husband Guy, who recently move into an old Gothic apartment building. Despite being warned about the building's strange history involving murder and witchcraft, they move in anyway. And the couple are quickly welcomed by neighbors Minnie and Roman, who Rosemary gets a weird vibe from. Due to some freak accident blinding his theatrical rival, Guy gets a great role and agrees to try for their first kid. Hurrah! But not. But that night, Rosemary has a dream involving an inhuman creature, and the next day she has claw scratches basically everywhere, and then somehow she becomes pregnant, but then falls severely ill, losing more and more weight and craving raw meat. Everything goes tits up, and I can 100% say Guy is not the father.